Hey everyone, I just wanted to make a quick tutorial because I know a lot of you are worried about the upcoming quiz, and with this being the lecture work, I just wanted to go over how to create those exploded view configurations again and then make that exploded view drawing. So I'm just going to work with our flange assembly. Once you have your parts fully mated, you can then go to your configurations tab. Underneath the actual assembly file name, you're going to create that exploded view configuration. Do not put it under the default. It's just easier to work with if it's under the actual name. So I go and right click and add configuration. I'm just going to name it exploded view. And always make sure that you select the checkbox for use in the bill of materials. And then hit OK. Once I have that configuration open, I want to make sure I'm still in that configuration. Then, under the Assembly tab, I'll come up here to the exploded view. I want to make all my steps in this one single exploded view. So for step 1, I'm going to reverse engineer this part so I know that my nuts were the last thing to go on to this assembly. I'm going to select one of them. The reason I'm only selecting one is because since I used a pattern to create the mates in all of them, I can then just click on each nut once I move one's placement and they will all go out in that same direction. So I select that nut, I'm going to grab the Z-axis and I'm going to move it back. We want to make sure that there's enough space between all of our parts that our balloons that we list are going to have room. So I'm going to move it back just a little more. Remember, you can actually specify a distance, so maybe I'll just have this be 15 inches away. Since I already have the one moved, I'm just going to click on each of these nuts. You can see it automatically pops out to that same 15-inch distance. It saves me a step since I'm not having to move each of the nuts myself. I'm just going to move all of these nuts out, and then I'll create a new step. So once this one step is done, make sure that you're hitting done and not the green check mark until your full assembly is pulled apart. So I'm going to hit done here. As you can see, that really moved my nuts down instead of on that Z-axis. I'm going to leave them for now, but I'll go back in and change that. So with the second step, I'm going to do the same thing but with the washers. So I'm going to select it. I'm moving it on that Z-axis. This time I'm going to change that distance to just be maybe 10. So I'm like, give myself some space between that washer as well as that nut. So once I have the one moved, I'm going to make sure I go and just select all of them, making sure I'm not changing any of the relationships and that we're staying in the Z-axis. Before, I accidentally selected a nut and switched the axis that I moved it from. That's why they are now below. So once in a while I'll make these little issues or changes so I can show you how to go in and fix them if it happens on your end. So once I have all those washers done, I'm just going to hit done. Now I'm on my exploded view, step 3. I'm now going to move to this side of my bolts. Now, even though my bolts are different sizes, I can bring them out of the assembly and have them all lined up the same distance. So I'm going to select the one, bring it out forward this time, since it is going to be placed into the flange on this direction. I'm going to be consistent, so since this is my first part out, I'm going to set that distance also as being 15. We want everything to be close enough together that it fits within our part document window as well as that drawing document we are going to create, but far enough away where everything has its own space and we can see exactly where our balloons are going to point to each item. Since I have the one bolt already brought out, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I click on the rest of my bolts to bring them out to that same distance of 15 inches away from that front flange. So this would happen to any part you can just bring out. As long as you're clicking them all within the same step, it's going to have that same distance listed. So now that they are all out, I'm going to hit done. I'm now going to select my front flange, and I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to have this be 10 inches away, so it's a little closer to those bolts. Actually, I'm going to change that. We're going to have it be 7. So I want a little more space, so I make sure that I'm going to have enough room for all my balloons. I'm going to hit done. So my last step is I'm going to select the back flange. I'm going to bring it behind. This is because I want to make sure I see that O-ring in the center. I'm going to select this distance as, we'll do 7 as well. So now our flange is the same distance in the front and the back as it is to the O-ring. Then I'm going to hit done. Since all of my parts are pulled away, I'm going to go ahead and hit that green check mark. So we still have those nuts that are kind of in the wrong area. So I can go in to these individual steps and edit them. Since it's my first exploded step, I'm just going to go into that exploded step and edit it. So right click, select edit. I'm then going to switch this direction. So this is wanting me to be in the Y axis when I actually want to use the Z axis. So even if I rotate it, it's still now going to be in the wrong placement. I'm going to switch that back to where it was previously. I know that I want it to be in my Z-axis, so I'm actually just going to select that Z-axis. You can see by just clicking in this field, I could then select the arrow I want my axes to be on. So these changes are easily made. It still kept that 15-inch distance, so now everything is easily seen and aligned, but I'm able to just change the axes I pulled my parts away in that direction. So this is an easy change that can be made without having to recreate a whole new exploded view. I'm then going to hit OK. So I still have all my steps listed. I can go in here and select default, and it's going to bring my full assembly back together. Or I can select my exploded view, and it's going to explode my parts back. So once you have your parts exploded and they're nicely aligned, then you'll go up and you can go to this page, select that drop down arrow, and we're going to hit make drawing from a part or an assembly. It's easier to create the drawing when your files are already open because I'm not having to go browse for them. For my sheet size, remember the standard is A3. You can choose ISO. This is going to make your dimensions just be placed all vertical where you would be reading them from the side over. If you go in and select A3 ANSI, this is going to allow all your dimensions to be read from the bottom up. So kind of the current standard we work with. You can change these standards at any point in any document. So I'm going to select A3 ANSI. It's just what I prefer. You can use A3 ISO. You just have to use an A3 sheet size. And then I'll hit OK. Since I already have my assembly open, this view palette is going to pop open and I can just click on the exploded assembly. If this was not open because my assembly wasn't open, then under the View tab, I could just go and select Model View it will pop up that feature tree manager where you can then just browse for your file to insert. I'm just going to click on that isometric view and bring it over and drag and drop it into my part document window. With my assembly selected or highlighted, remember you don't have to click on the actual parts, just somewhere within that space, close to it, you're going to see a drawing view manager tree. Your reference configuration should be set to exploded view. If you select default, it's going to have your assembly snap back together. You want to make sure you select exploded view. You have to check show in the exploded or model break state. This is what's going to show it all exploded out. If for some reason I wanted to show the process of this being put together by single steps, so say I have the whole flange together but I only want the bolts out, you could create individual exploded views where only one item is exploded out or moved at a time, and that list is going to show up here. So you'd have exploded view 1, 2, 3, however many you chose, and you could choose which view you want this drawing to be. So since I just have the one, I'm going to just select my exploded view. It's already in isometric for my orientation, so I don't need to change that. For my display style, I do want to make sure that it's shaded with edges. So we can use the sheet scale, which I can see down here on the bottom is 1:8, or I can just scale up my part individually. I'm going to select use a custom scale, and I'm going to select maybe 1:4. It could be a little bigger even. So we can go to a user model text scale, and I'm going to select the 1:3. Just type it in, and it gives me a pretty good size. Then I'm going to hit OK. With my assembly still selected, I want you to go up to annotation, and then we're going to select auto balloon. If all your balloons are just instantly brought in, you can grab them as long as they're all highlighted blue and move them in and out at the same time. Since they are all in different placements, it's going to be easier to move them individually. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to zoom into all of these. Remember, you want to make sure all of your headers are correct. You want all your arrowheads to be pointing in the right at the right part, as well as showing an arrowhead. I'm going to just move these around a little bit so I can kind of see them a little better. So my first example for number 1 is going to be, if my arrowhead is too close to the part, it now will just appear as a black dot. Points will be taken off for this. I want you to really pay close attention to these. If my leader line is not attached at all to my part, it will turn this yellow gold look with a question mark because it doesn't know what part it's referencing. So you need to make sure that that arrowhead style is exactly to an edge so it keeps that arrowhead appearance. Make sure that you're bringing all of your balloons down so they're close to your part so you can actually see them and they're not spread across your whole part window. Remember that each part only needs one balloon, so they all don't have to be ballooned. Zoom in if you really need to move these smaller arrows. They can be a challenge on these smaller parts. Okay, so I can see all of my arrowheads. I can see exactly where my numbers are pointed. Now, with my assembly still selected, I'll go into Insert and go to Tables and select Bill of Materials and then hit OK. It will now line up with my cursor, so I'm just going to place it down into my drawing. Remember to always get rid of any columns that are not being used. So our description columns are not being used. So I just select the column C, right click, and go to delete in column. Now we have a nice clean bill of materials that just has our item number listed, our part number, and the quantity of how many are in our whole assembly. The last thing is, if I save this assembly as my flange assembly, you're going to notice that drawing name or number automatically is the same. If you need to change this, remember to right click and go to edit sheet format. Then you can double click in here what you want your part to be named. You can add your name from a text box using a note. Once in a while, a lot of these areas will already have a text box that's not being used. You can also double click in there and add your name. Remember to select this arrow to return back to your drawing once you're done editing your title block. So for the quiz, this is all I'm looking for. I will give you parts you will create in an assembly. Then I will give you an assembly and you will create a configuration for the exploded view, pull everything apart, and create a drawing like this, where you have an isometric exploded view. You include your bill of materials, pay attention to those leader arrowhead lines, and then add in a bill of materials. You also will edit your title block to include your name. I hope this tutorial has helped and cleared up some issues. Have a great week.